Could President Donald Trump be an Oklahoma State fan? We know that he loves orange so much that it's a permanent tanning bed setting. We also know that he loves cowboy wrestler Wyatt Hendrickson, giving us the salute seen around the world. And now we can all rally together to hate or praise the fact that he could be saving what's left of college football for all of us.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets when your first $5 bet is a winner. Get squared away today with FanDuel.com. Meanwhile, we slide into the conversation of saving college football. And seemingly, Donald Trump is trying to do something about what is going on with the ridiculous Wild Wild West days that we find ourselves within. Now, as it currently sits, Oklahoma State's doing very well in the transfer portal. We're doing very well in the recruiting side of the equation as well. So I don't know if we want to mess with it too much, but we also know that there's now a 16-team playoff, and what that does for the Big Ten and the SEC pales in comparison to how much it alienates the Big 12 and the ACC for the foreseeable future. And now you have this potential shakeup that would be very good. I know everybody getting to that, $20.5 million that can be kind of, shifted through the school could be a big deal. But we're going to have guardrails. And more importantly, we're going to have somebody that is willing to have the uncomfortable conversations about what the guardrails could look like and what the improprieties will equal in terms of sentencing, right? There has to be some ramifications for the Wild Wild West continuing or the illegal recruiting continuing. And we all know that that's the biggest obstacle, in my personal opinion. Regardless of what the money is going to be distributed evenly throughout the universities, they're still going to have those backdoor deals. So having some governing body to manage that, to me, makes a ton of sense. And Ross Dellinger was one that was kind of, talking about this most recently as he met with Nick Saban, and they plan to put together a commission, a presidential commission that could essentially find a way to keep the nuts and bolts of this thing from getting too outlandish and potentially prevent the SEC and the Big Ten further alienating everybody else in the sport. So Ross Dellinger put out that there was a quote, "Trump's involvement, though not surprising, is a landmark moment in college athletics history. The country's most powerful elected leader potentially shaping the future of the industry. Details of the commission are for now being kept private, but the group is expected to feature college sports stakeholders, prominent business people with deep connections to college football, and perhaps even former coaches and administrators. The commission is expected to deeply examine the unwieldy landscape of college sports, including the frequency of player movement and transfer portal, the unregulated booster compensation paid to athletes, the debate of college athlete employment, and the application of Title IX to school revenue share payments, and even conference membership makeups and conference television contracts. With those knowledge of the commission have told Yahoo Sports. Dellinger noted that Trump could announce the commission through an executive order, and that legendary former Alabama head coach Nick Saban is expected to play an integral role in the commission's work. On top of that, we also now know that Texas Tech's version of Boone Pickens, Cody Campbell, is also going to be involved in this. And I think Nick Saban's obviously going to have a little bit of a slant when it comes to what's better for the SEC as opposed to the Big 12, where Cody Campbell can come into this. And his philosophy behind the Rudy stuff, I implore you to go look at some of the things that Cody Campbell has written in the past in regards to college football. He has a very good head on his shoulders, and I think he has a good lay of the land for what would be beneficial to the Big 12. But at the end of the day, we have to have some governing body that's going to make this make sense and make it to where that your Alabamas of the world don't continually have advantages all over the country. Listen, at the end of the day, we've got to do some winning for any of this to matter. But this is getting to a point where clearly some of the powers that be would prefer it to just end up being the Big Ten and the SEC, or that's seemingly what they're trying to do. And the 16-team playoff isn't going to do much better because now you're talking about 4 guarantees for the SEC and the Big Ten plus this the extra, automatic qualifiers. Well, after all of the complaining and moaning that Lane Kiffin did this previous season, you and I both know that one of those extra qualifiers are going to be given to the SEC school that seems to be complaining the most. And this is an opportunity to it kind of be with guardrails at least. Because Nick Saban, although he's probably going to vouch for the SEC as often as possible, he has been very outspoken in regards to the NIL and the transfer era and how windows should be and how the contract should be written up. If they're going to replace letters of intent, then there has to be, again, ramifications. If you're going to sign this deal with this university that's going to take the place of an LOI, there's got to be negative connotations behind you bailing out of that contract. So this is an opportunity for all of college football, whether you like or love the political landscape. I don't think it really matters. It could have been Biden. It could have been Harris. It happens to be Trump. Whomever is in charge needed to have some sort of governing body take a deeper look into this and to make sure that all of these student athletes are getting the best opportunities, not only for their beneficial scholastic opportunities, but also from the athletic side of it as well. I mean, we all know that this game is getting crazy. Following it is becoming difficult. Having an understanding of what your conference is going to look like, it's very convoluted. So this is probably a necessity. And in Cowboy country, we all have to admit that moment between Wyatt Hendrickson and Donald Trump is something that we're always going to remember, whether you like him, love him, hate him, doesn't really matter. That was the biggest upset of all time in the history of wrestling. And to have a second lieutenant in Wyatt Hendrickson give that salute to Trump and then them have the embrace afterwards, I think it united some of us in Oklahoma State country who might fall on opposite sides of the political landscape. But this isn't about politics. This is about anybody that has the intestinal fortitude to be willing to do something to change the game and make sure that we still have a game worth following in the near future. Because at this current rate, this sport is not going to be the same. And I don't know how long the Big 12 continues to hold out without some of these assistance kind of things popping up. Anywho, speaking of assistance, the rest of the Big 12 didn't give us a lot when it came to the scheduling, but we're going to hold down the fort there. Ladies and gentlemen, FanDuel is the bee's knees for all of your betting needs. Of course, you already know that, but the NBA playoffs being in full spring swing, I know words are hard for me, means it's time for you to capitalize today. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time for you to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. Whether tip-off or live, it doesn't matter. With player props, the performance trends and same-game parlays mean the fans are going to have more ways to play and win bigger than ever. What would it look like if you combine your favorite player prop bet mid-game based on how the action's unfolding? Or how could a $200 bonus and bets add to the excitement of your first $5 play? Right now, you can go to FanDuel, especially if you're new to FanDuel. It's the perfect time to sign up. Head on over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets. With FanDuel, all you have to do is make every moment matter more with FanDuel. The bee's knees and all of your betting needs. Go to FanDuel.com to get squared away today. And the Big 12 might need some help from Trump and others with the new 16-team format. So I was doing some digging, and when you have a conversation about relevance, how can the Big 12 find more relevancy throughout the course of the season before we get to the CFP conversation? Because, the strength of schedule, all of that has to come into the equation. And we didn't help ourselves whatsoever in the Big 12. Now, of course, there is going to be the opposite end of the spectrum as well. The argument of, well, why would you schedule difficult opponents in your non-con when at the end of the day, you're only going to get 2 slots for the Big 12 more often than not anyways? So I understand that to be some semblance of a conversational piece, but it's like chicken shiznit, in my personal opinion. I love the fact that Oklahoma State's not afraid to go out and play Oregon and Bama, and I think Arkansas does carry some weight. And there are going to be some games in the Big 12 that carry some weight. But realistically, there's only one that's going to move the needle to a massive amount, and that's going to be Oklahoma State versus Oregon. The rest of the conference didn't really do much when it comes to nailing down quality opponents to help with the bolstering of the strength of schedule, RPI, whatever the case may be, at the end of the season. Utah does get to play UCLA. That could be a pretty good game with a decent amount of eyeballs on it. Baylor versus Auburn, I think, is up there, as well as you could have the Baylor-SMU conversation just because SMU did represent the ACC last year. UCF, North Carolina, that's probably a big one. But what is Bill Belichick going to look like in year one? Is Bill Belichick even going to be the coach when the season starts with all of his extracurricular activities going on right at the moment? Then you have the Iowa versus Iowa State battle for the Cy-Hawk. That's always pretty fun, but it doesn't get a lot of national recognition. And even when Iowa State does win that game, it doesn't necessarily bolster them throughout the course of the season. K-State versus Army, not going to move the needle. KU versus Mizzou, the border war. Yeah, it's a good game for all of us that love college football, but outside of that, it's not going to do much. West Virginia Pitt, it's another one of those, kind of like the border war or kind of like for the Cy-Hawk Trophy, the backyard brawl. It's something that we need to continuously see every single year. But outside of that, then you have Arizona State taking on Mississippi State. Definitely doesn't move the needle much. Arizona, their most difficult non-con game is against Hawaii, so they're not really helping themselves. BYU gets Stanford. Too bad Stanford doesn't play football much anymore. Houston has Oregon State, and so does Texas Tech. So Houston and Texas Tech combined decided let's swing for the fences and go play a team that's not even in a power conference. I know these schedules were made, in the past, but we need to do something to shift this. So you have Cincy versus Nebraska. Is Nebraska going to be something this year? Maybe. Colorado, Georgia Tech doesn't really do much. So to me, you have Utah versus UCLA, Baylor versus Auburn, and then I do like UCF, North Carolina. But outside of that, it basically boils down to most eyeballs in all of Big 12 country are going to be on Oklahoma State versus Oregon when we travel up to Eugene for week 2. I didn't really think that we would be carrying the weight of the Big 12 and the non-con throughout the course of the season, but that seems to be the case. And by all means, let me know if I'm crazy down in the comment section for all you fine folks out here on YouTube. Is there another game out here that maybe is getting underrated that I'm just not seeing? And what would be the reasoning between some of these schools deciding not to schedule any difficult opponents? Now, you can't really even say that the strength of schedule and RPI weren't factored because, again, most of these schedules were made a few years in advance. So the non-understanding of the shifting of college football, to me, is problematic. And this scheduling is an issue. We all know that financially it's not easy to get out of some of these games that have been scheduled in the past. But it might be advantageous for teams to do that because the Big 12 is not going to get any more respect this season when their marquee games are versus Oregon State and Rice and Nebraska and Army. Now, Army is very problematic, especially given that style of offense. They can beat anybody because it's very, very difficult, if not almost borderline impossible, to adequately prepare for a team like Army. So that's why they can creep up and get you. And the transfer portal and the 105 roster limitation is going to make a lot of these rosters much more competitive than even the last couple of years that we've seen. But am I the only one that thinks that we're doing ourselves a disservice here? When some of the conversations are shifting towards TV viewership and what that could potentially look like in the next round of realignment, which is seemingly something that some of the powers that be are still trying to make happen, they have to know it's not good for the sport. It might be good for their particular university. It might be good for their particular conference, but it's not going to be good for the sport as a whole. If this is just going to come down to who can make the most amount of money, then what are we even out here doing? And part of gaining the respect, if the Big 12 is going to gain respect, of course, we have to win in the CFP. But if you win some of these marquee games in the non-conference as well, to me, that at least keeps us in the conversation of the rankings if you're going to go to this 16-team format and you're going to have 3 automatic qualifiers and they don't have to be in any particular conference, this non-conference is going to become important. And I feel like a lot of Big 12 teams, unfortunately, this season are not going to be able to reap the benefits. So you're now put in a predicament where if your most meaningful game is against North Dakota State or Army, then you basically have to win out. You have to put yourself in a position where you're having double-digit W's before the end of the season to be in the conversation to perhaps jump up into the CFP. But you take Oklahoma State for an example this season. We play Oregon week 2, and let's just assume that the Oregon Ducks do what the Oregon Ducks do, and they kind of hover in that top 10, top 15 range all season. That is going to be something that potentially could help boost Oklahoma State at the end of the year to be one of those automatic qualifiers outside of the top 2. So you got your 4 Big 10, your 4 SEC, your 2 ACC, your 2 Big 12s. The automatic qualifier conversation, it could get much more interesting contingent upon what your schedule looks like. And for us, we have Oregon, we have a home and home with Oregon, and we have a home and home with Alabama. Then we have another game against Arkansas. Why do not other teams in the conference feel that this is going to be a necessity moving forward? And I understand there is this back and forth of, well, why would you schedule difficult teams to put a loss at the beginning of the season that doesn't really matter? We say that, but we also know at the end of the day, the CFP, the committee, they're going to use bits and pieces of things to make certain scenarios make sense. Just like the 16-team playoff with 4 automatic qualifiers for the 2 biggest conferences. That has nothing to do with the quality of the football per se, because if you watched Arizona State versus Texas last year, that was a tale of 2 halves. Texas was better in the first half. Arizona State was better in the second half. They look like 2 completely different games. So you can't say that the talent disparity is so big that scheduling cupcake teams is going to be beneficial. Sure, if you're in the SEC, okay, that makes sense. But maybe take advantage of that. Perhaps there's an Auburn-style team that thinks they could schedule Big 12 teams for W's and let them feel that way. Now, do I anticipate Oklahoma State going up into UG, Oregon and getting a W? No. But crazier things have happened. In this wild, wacky world of collegiate sports, we have no clue what this Cowboy roster is going to look like. Right? We've got a bunch of former 5-star, former consensus 4-star dudes that went to your Ohio States, your LSUs, your Miamis of the world, and for whatever reason didn't work out, and now they're Oklahoma State Cowboys. It doesn't mean that it's going to work out here either, but when you have a game like that on the schedule, not only does it help from a national audience, a viewership standpoint, but if you do win that game, it catapults the perception of the Big 12 quite a bit. But if somebody goes out and beats SMU like BYU did last year, they got 0 credit for it. It didn't matter at the end of the day because SMU was an afterthought. So you scheduling the SMUs of the world and even the North Dakota States of the world, sure, it might be a W, but then it's a risky W because you might not win. And on top of that, you're not going to get any respect for it. You're not going to get any credit for it. You're not going to get any TV viewership, which means marketability for it. So, what are we doing? Why would we not, as a conference, schedule more aggressively? So if you have a bunch of ridiculous games scheduled against Wofford or Weber State, get rid of those. If anything, let's continue this war with the ACC. If the Big Ten and the SEC are not going to play ball, which I do think that they would, just because egos in those conferences are obviously the biggest they can get. So they're going to want that conversational piece of, oh, well, we can beat any Big 12 team or we beat X, Y, and Z Big 12 teams. But it needs to go the other way. When you look at the Big 12 schedules and the non-conference, they're abysmal this season. So outside of Oklahoma State, Oregon, Utah, UCLA, UCF, North Carolina, maybe the border war is going to have some viewership. And then, of course, the Holy War. But non-conference-wise, there's nothing in the Big 12 exciting happening outside of a few games. So at the end of the season, if there's any teams that are on the bubble that feels like, well, we should have got in, but your competition and the non-con is Weber State and some of Tom, Dick, and Harry University up the road, then what are we even doing? I love that Oklahoma State has done this, and I love that we have more games coming up that are going to be equally as difficult, and they're going to be equally as big on the national TV pictures. That's what we need. That's what this conference needs. And so now Oklahoma State fans are going to be, of course, rocking with the game up in Eugene. But now all of Big 12 country is going to have to cheer for Oklahoma State that weekend because we need that viewership. We need those dollar bills. We need those eyeballs. We need that clout. And we need that W. Speaking of W's, it's always a win when you can save money or manage your money because we've all checked our bank account and wondered where did the money go. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's very easy for us all to lose track. This is where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch can be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you just stop managing money, and now you can start building wealth with it. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever when your partner is Monarch. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first entire year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for half off your first entire year with Monarch Money. Money well spent seems to be pretty popular in Cowboy Wrestling. Thus far, I don't think anybody has had anything negative to say about what we've been doing. And if you paid attention recently, we had a couple big-time hires, just like we also had multiple champions at the Pan Am Championships. Of course, Wyatt Hendrickson won in resounding style with a massive flip that probably hurt the hearts and souls and bodies. And then you had Zahid Valencia representing Cowboy RTC training with a gold medal. Then you had Joey McKenna getting a silver medal. Then you have, of course, Jack Forrest, who's an upcoming senior in high school, Oklahoma State commit, dominate his way through it, winning like 11-0, 10-0, 11-0. So did LaDarian Lockett, the Stiller High School product that's going to be wrestling for Oklahoma State this season. He should factor into the mix very, very quickly because it wasn't even close. He won, was 11-0, and then he had a DQ because somebody tried to break his neck. And then he responded from that with another 10-0 W to win a gold medal. So it wasn't just the winning, it was the utter domination. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that with our good buddy Zach Seiko tomorrow, because we've got some hires. We've got some hires that I think are a big deal, right? Well, we talk about having a degree of separation between us and Northern Iowa in the Big 12s and Nationals. We didn't really get that degree of separation much in the Big 12s. We did finally get some of that in Nationals, and it made you scratch your head. Well, how is Northern Iowa this good? How are they close to the Oklahoma State, Penn State, Iowa, Nebraska levels? Well, partially because of coaching and partially because of Coach Lee Roper, who is now an Oklahoma State Cowboy. Coach Roper is now going to be the executive director and senior level RTC coach. This is a former assistant that had so many 12 All-Americans at Northern Iowa, 69 NCAA qualifiers, 16 conference champions. The first two All-Americans since 2000. Northern Iowa also produced a pair of NCAA champions in Drew Foster and Parker Kekaisen. The 184-pounder Kekaisen was instrumental to getting the training from Coach Roper. So I think this is an absolutely big get. And again, you're trying to have more degrees of separation between Oklahoma State and Northern Iowa. This is going to give us some of that. Coach Roper is a massive acquisition, as is Sohair, even though I can't pronounce the rest of his name. But one of the biggest benefits to getting Coach Roper to come on to Oklahoma State is the fact that he was able to bring Rebecca Roper alongside for the ride as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a big deal, right? Cowgirl Wrestling is on the uptick, and you've seen some of the talent we've been able to bring in. And Rebecca Roper is now going to be the executive director for OSU Cowgirl Wrestling. And our buddy Lo Single put out that Becca brings a strong background in nonprofit management, a deep commitment to student athlete development, and a clear vision for elevating Cowgirl Wrestling to new heights. Her leadership marks an exciting step forward as we continue to grow the program and build the legacy of excellence on and off the mat. She's been very heavily involved in Iowa wrestling, even working in the museum that they have up there. And of course, whenever you have somebody that you share this with and your partner, that's kind of a Cowboy Culture move. Like Oklahoma State cut its teeth forever in football on getting the 2-star that had family, brother, sister, cousin, uncle, whatever, that would come to Oklahoma State or had been to Oklahoma State. Whenever you can get somebody from Northern Iowa that's been responsible for some of their best wrestlers of all time to come to Oklahoma State, and now you get Becca Roper to come over to help with the cowgirl side of things, I don't know how big the Cowgirl Wrestling can get, but we're off to a very, very hot start. And this is a Cowboy Culture get that kind of takes away from some of the UNI power. And this is Rebecca Roper is like a Dan Gable Museum disciple who has helped with Iowa women's wrestling as well. She's very instrumental in getting that off the ground. So it's a good time to be a cowboy or a cowgirl as the wrestling landscape continues to favor Oklahoma State a little bit more, but we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor. Hit the like button. Dislike it if you didn't like it. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people, you're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fountain, the fondue, the funny stuff, the funky stuff. You're all of it that makes this thing go. I appreciate you. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. Alrighty, y'all. Later, my taters.